everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Isla Brock, and this is News in Hypnosis. I am a certified hypnotherapist with Central Valley Hypnotherapy, and this is my weekly segment, episode 8 of 12, and this is on fears and phobias and hypnotherapy and how they can both, all that can work together. But first, I'm going to show you my cup real quick. It's a little fur babies for mom. The mom day is coming up. I have 4 little fur babies. I mean, I have 3 children, but you know, they're out of the house.
I gotta do it again.
That's all right.
The damn thing froze.
Okay.
Oh, man. That's my fault.
Let's call it, it's not fault, it's just feedback.
My feedback, yeah.
It's just all feedback. We're learning, we're getting resources.
All right. Okay, here we go. This is the third take. So it's
fourth take.
It's the fourth?
Yeah, take 4.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, action.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining. This is News in Hypnosis, and I'm your host, Isla Brock. I am a certified hypnotherapist with Central Valley Hypnotherapy. And today, we're going to be talking about fears and phobias and how hypnotherapy can help somebody who has fears or phobias. But first, I'm going to quickly show you my weekly cup. It's on a little leopard skin thing. It says Fur Mom because I have quite a few fur babies at home. And we're going to get right into this segment. There's a lot to cover on fears and phobias with hypnotherapy. I'm going to go to the first slide, which is the second slide, I guess it's called. What are fears and phobias? And how can hypnotherapy help you? And when to seek professional assistance from a medical professional. Fears and phobias. First, we need to learn what they are and how they're different. Next slide. Have you or someone you know ever said, I'm afraid of spiders or heights, I'm afraid of water or snakes? Can you think of others? Maybe you have something special. Maybe you're afraid of crowds, people. I've heard of one that people are afraid of pickles. There's an actual phobia for pickles. I don't know what a pickle would have done to anybody, but it's there. And sometimes I wonder if there's pseudo phobias, but that's not for me to decide or judge. But sometimes people have a fear, and there's over 400 different types of phobias. So let's talk about that. A phobia, let me go back into the next slide of what other fears are like so that we can see the differences here. Other fears. I do not like to fly, afraid to drive. I don't care to be around a lot of people, like I said earlier. Some people are claustrophobic with tight places like elevators or even escalators. They can't eat something because they might choke. They're afraid of that. They don't like to go to the dentist, white coat syndrome. They hate hospitals. Fire can scare people. It scares me. But that's a proper fear. But sometimes it can be improper. The fire on the stove when you're cooking someone can be afraid of that. Some people scream when they see bugs. I've not screamed in a long time, so it's working for me. But a phobia can be a debilitating and overwhelming to somebody condition that they have, and they're carrying it around with them. And finding the source or cause is a great step in eliminating that element. So I used to be terrified. I live in California. I was born and raised in Southern California, and earthquakes are part of the Southern California living. I remember I've been in every major earthquake since 1971 during the Silmar quake. 71 or 72? Anyway, I was about 7, 8 years old when that happened. I was on the top bunk, and I remember that earthquake. Now, I was a kid, and it was fun, but I do remember after it all went down, my mom went outside to go see how the neighbors were, whatever. We were in an apartment building on the 2nd floor, but the carpet had separated from the wall. I remember like an inch or so. I thought that was kind of interesting. That's how much it shook. And the next major earthquake I was in the Whittier's Narrow back in 87, and then the next one I think was Northridge, was that 91 or 93, whatever that was. So I've been in a lot of major earthquakes, and I didn't know I had a fear or a phobia to them until the Whittier's earthquake in 87. And my body shook so bad anyway, but I didn't understand my phobia. I didn't understand my fear. I just knew that things were shaking and I didn't like it and it scared me. They had to pull me out from underneath the desk. I was at work when it happened. And I remember being outside and there were tremors and I just remember being afraid. And so at the time I was married, my husband at the time, he thought maybe education would help. And I did seek mental health help because I was really not in a good way. I couldn't be alone. I was just afraid of everything until I learned about earthquakes and what they were and how they work and why they work. And actually small tremors are a good thing because when there's too much pressure on the plates, that's when we have the big ones. They slip and blah, blah, blah. But my education helped. So I'm not afraid of earthquakes. Yeah, they jolt me, but if it's not a 5.0, I ain't getting out of bed. That's how cool I am with them now. But they can be debilitating, and I remember feeling that debilitating kind of emotion just afterwards for weeks, and I started to get better, and I just learned and matured through it. So even when the Northridge happened, I was like, I stood in the doorway. I was more concerned about my children. They slept right through it. Okay, and we all just went back to bed. It was no big deal. But the power of your imagination and your emotional state can greatly reduce that dread that you might have with this debilitating fear or phobia. But how do you know? How do you know if it's a fear or a phobia? As I said, next slide where it says the 400 different types of fears and phobias. How do you know? There are different types, and they're called fears or phobias, 400 of them. I'm not going to list them all here. But what's the difference? First of all, a fear is something that you have an experience with. If you're afraid to fly and you were in a plane crash, that would be a reasonable fear. If you gave an oral book report in the 3rd grade and now you got laughed at, and now you're afraid to speak in public, that would be a reasonable fear. That's something that had substance behind it, an experience that went with it. And that would be the difference between the fear and what would be a phobia. The phobia part would be something that's more irrational, that you don't have an experience with, but something you learned along the way. Maybe you have never touched a snake in your life and you've never seen one up close, but you're terrified of snakes because of what you see on television or what other people have said. Well, that can become a phobia because you have no real experience with a snake. For example, some people develop a phobia to flying. I may have said this in previous episodes. People who are afraid to fly that have never flown because maybe a parent or a relative is afraid to fly and they just put that fear onto somebody else. You learn to be afraid. That would be more of a phobia. You want a phobic response to something. So you don't really have a fear. You have this phobia to it because it's irrational to have something. You're afraid of wind, even though there's wind everywhere. You don't have a bad experience with it. Some people become afraid to drive because they have a natural fear. They've never been in an accident. Nothing's ever bad happened to them. They just, for some reason, have created in their head. Their imagination kind of runs away with you. And your imagination is pretty powerful. It's allowing you to have that phobia too. And then when did it start? And you can even ask yourself, why did it start? What timeline? When was I not afraid of the issue? If we're working on a phobia. There are people that have fears of choking, or they have a choking sensation. So there was a client, client, whatever, I was working with somebody, and they were in their early 60s, and they had just something was just like choking on them. They just had this fear of choking, and it was just on the side of their neck. They always felt this choking sensation. So I asked when did they have that choking sensation? And he said, I don't know, in my 30s. I said, pick an age. So he picked 32, and then he changed his mind. Now, finally settled on 38. And it does teach you there that your mind won't lie to you. It's going to help you tell the truth. So he was 38 years old, and then he asked his mother, he remembered while we were talking that he had asked his mother about his birth. His mother was talking about when he was born, and the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. Oh, it was like that moment when he put like 2 and 2 together. It's almost like it just disappeared, and he hasn't had a problem since. So it could just be that easy to help yourself even find out if there's some sort of cause. When did it start? What was going on before it happened, etc. So let's go to the next slide. Fear, again, is a rational experience, or one that is perceived, a perceived rational experience, something that is known to your mind, that to you. And again, the phobia, just kind of a reiteration, it's irrational, something that all of a sudden it just started to happen. You just started to become afraid of something, or you just developed this phobia out of nowhere. And like I said, there's hundreds of different phobias that you can work on. Now, sometimes it can be so problematic that medical attention might be sought. When would that be? If you can't sleep, if it's affecting your health in any way, or your actual lifestyle, I would definitely encourage you to seek medical attention and maybe even psychiatric evaluation on why that is, just to make sure that there's no contraindications and it's not more than what you think it is. Okay? That's my counsel to you. Health experts may not always agree on definitions of the different types of fears and phobias. Some of them may have more than one definition as well, or more than one name. Some of them are just what they are. We're familiar with the claustrophobia, agoraphobia, arachnophobia, being afraid of spiders, etc. Those are just common, everyday ones. There's people that are afraid of gaining weight. It's called obesophobia. Literally, it's called obesophobia. There's people who are afraid they have a fear of beards, and that's called pogonophobia. I'm probably botching how these are pronounced. There's some that are afraid of being alone, which is autophobia. People who have a fear of bacteria, the germaphobes, we call them, but also known as bacteriophobia. People who are afraid of computers, which is cyberphobia. It's like they have a phobia that the computer never did anything wrong to them. A lot of it's just the unknown. Now what do I do? Me with my earthquakes, it was the unknown. I had a whole different idea of why earthquakes happened. I was about 23 when that Whittier's one happened, and I remember when I was learning about them thinking, wow, I sure didn't learn a lot in school about earthquakes, but I learned a lot then, and I'm definitely okay. So cause or learning about something is important. Just education can be your most powerful resource. And just discussing yourself. Is this a fear? There's some sort of experience that I can associate with this fear, or is it something that just suddenly happened? Again, I'm just going to go over this one more time. Phobias are irrational fears, and fears are actual rational, some sort of substance behind it. There's an association between a stimulus and another stimulus. So whenever either of these stimuluses are present and the other gets recalled by the subconscious mind, that maybe all of a sudden you'll start to feel that fear. So a good example would be maybe you have a favorite chair that you like to sit in, and it's at the end of the day, and that's your chair. And you have a process. And maybe sitting in that chair, taking off your shoes, settling in, and your after work beverage, if you have one, turning on the news or whatever, and then all of a sudden those behaviors are a stimulus to something else. Perhaps there's an association with those two that you would be, an alarm, internal alarm might go off, and you get up and you don't know. I mean, it could be something so simple as that kind of a stimulus. I've got lint in my mouth, I'm sorry. Maybe it's how you wake up in the morning. Now, I know some people, they wake up to music and they have their favorite song on their alarm and they wake up to it. And at first it was great. Now they hate the song. They created some sort of stimulus, negative reaction to that. So pick a song you already hate so you'll get up. Anyway, just triggers that can help you learn not, get your phobia. I know people who are afraid not to make their bed. So if they didn't make their bed and they leave for the day, that's all they think about. They have that inner anxiety. It's kind of like a fear. Am I going to get caught for not making my bed today? That's possibly what's going on. Or those that make their bed. Am I going to get caught today for making my bed and they never have made their bed before? So it can have the same effect, just in an opposite way. Other areas where the associations can be triggered, very important on fears and phobias, is low blood sugar. Very important. Maybe you have not had anything to eat in a long while. Maybe you're driving around in your car and you got cut off. Now your low blood sugar is the stimulus for driving makes me nervous. You didn't know that. You didn't put two and two, but your subconscious mind did. Always check that. What was going on that day? Well, I didn't have anything to eat. I know when I haven't eaten in a while, usually it takes about 18 to 20 hours for my blood sugar to be in a nervous state, typically. And I know if I just eat a little sugar, I start to feel better. I'm going to crash later, but it has its effect, and I'm irritable. So it can become, if you don't have food on a certain regular basis, and some people have to eat three meals, and they have to because they're just a bear if they don't eat. I have a friend who has a relative who's just like that. They have to have their meals at regular intervals, or they're just a bear to be around. Maybe it doesn't even manifest itself for a couple of years. Maybe all of a sudden, every time you hear that stimulus or that nervousness, maybe it's someone's voice and you've developed a nervousness or a fear of it. Deep baritone voice when you were a child, maybe father or uncle or grandpa had a deep baritone, very authoritative voice that scared you. And now all baritone voices or all deep voices you're in fear of them. There is a client I have that can't resonate with certain tones, prefers lower tones than higher tones, and they kind of scare her a little bit. So maybe she's not sure if it's psychological or because it's just something that just suddenly happened. So she's working on that. So it just really can know, as you examine yourself on your fears, always make sure that there's no medical indications. And if you aren't sure about your own glycemic levels and your matrix of your own sugar, talk to your doctor. Have a glycemic test taken. Some of them are 4 hours, some of them are 8 hours. Just to know what your body does with sugar when you do without sugar. What goes up, what goes down. But one of the biggest things when someone comes in to me with a fear or phobia, I always talk about, we're going to go right into the sugar to see what was going on around their food and how they eat now. And maybe that might be a pattern of how they ate before. So low blood sugar can be a common cause for many phobias. And that they weren't there and then suddenly they are. Everything was fine and now it's not. And again, on fears, the rational fear with the experience that's perceived, it's a known factor. We're going to go to the next slide where how can hypnotherapy help you? Well, actually, we're going to go to the one that says some ways to help yourself first. Sorry, director. Slide 9. Education is a powerful tool, like I said earlier. Learning about your fear or phobia, and it just may be enough to calm your nerves. It did mine when I was just fearful of earthquakes. Learning to relax during a stimulus trigger, and then seeking professional help. And make sure it's quality professional help. You might be talking to a friend who, when someone comes and talks to me about an earthquake, I'm going to give them my experience, what happened with me, and this is what I did. It may not resonate with you. It just depends. Now we're going to go to the next slide. How can hypnotherapy help? So how can I help you or anybody with a fear or phobia? As I said, we're going to first check the blood sugar. I'm not going to check it. I'm going to talk to you about how you eat on a regular basis. Are you constantly high carb, high sugar diet? Is a Snickers bar your lunch? Is soda pop, sugary soda pop, your daily diet? And then maybe one day you're without it, and all of a sudden now you have this phobia or this fear. There was a trigger. There were synapses going on in the brain that were creating a known. And it's something that's already known, and you got a stimulus, and it's creating an even deeper known that can create a new synapse, if you will, new cortex or whatever in the brain that causes the mind to just believe that it has this fear. So how I help you is we're gonna talk about your glycemic level, and that's in an initial consultation. And I'm also going to work with, now that we know, okay, whether it's a fear or a phobia, we're going to do what's called a desensitization. You would prefer to feel this way, whatever that is, and you are feeling like this. Well, in a hypnotic trance state, I'm going to be talking to you, and you're going to be using what's called idiomotor responses to me. So we're going to bring up the favored ideology, the favorite idea, the favorite emotion, and we're going to bring up as you imagine the fear or phobia. You're not going to actually experience it. We're just going to bring up as you imagine. So you'll be like looking at yourself, if you will, in that fear. And you'll just be collapsing one and replacing it with the other. And it's just going to be you're just lifting fingers back and forth in a hypnotic state. Or I might be doing another NLP using my hands on your hands, just collapsing one and bringing up the other one back and forth. It depends on the rapport and how the session goes. But in a first session, you would feel typically a lot better about your fear phobia. How long does it take? Some it might take one session, some it might take several. It is entirely up to you, because I don't have a set number of sessions that a client is required to have for anything. So there are sometimes there are techniques from people who say they're professionals with no experience in this area that could create more harm than good. So the goal is to create no harm. The idea is for you to leave my office or after a session with me, because I do remote sessions as well, feeling better than when you came in, but definitely not the same. You feel better about it. And again, there's no determined amount of sessions. Next slide, we're going to go to one that says, I'm going to talk a little bit about hypnosis and what it is. Well, with me, you're in a safe environment. I do no harm. I work with positivity and imagination and your emotions. It's an unconscious state. That's what hypnosis is. It's an unconscious state of awareness where your awareness is heightened. Sounds are amplified and time is distorted, and even more comforting than that. It's kind of like an opportunity for you to escape reality, if you will, this reality that you're listening to me in right now. And where that point I can start dropping in positive suggestions to help you create a new state, a new known that can take effect at the subconscious level. Next slide, please. Understanding hypnosis it's a tool that I use for hypnotherapy. And it's a state where we find ourselves throughout our day. It's an organic way of being, whether you're mesmerized, daydreaming, driving along, didn't remember how you got home. All of that's organic, and it's environmental hypnosis. Reading a book, oblivious to your surroundings, in the zone, whatever it is you want to call it. That's all trance, and it all means the same thing. A state, a trance, hypnosis, it's all the same in my world. So you can rewind the recording that you're listening to, and you can catch more of that information there. But in hypnosis, to the last slide, please. If you would contact me, we can discuss your fear or phobia and just see if hypnotherapy might be something you'd like to try. Here's my number, and it's also on the screen. There's my email address, islandb@centralvalleyhypnotherapy.com. It's free for consultation, even to determine if it's right for you. And if it's not, as I'm talking to you, I'm going to refer you out to somebody I would recommend, or give you a resource for you to find out what that is. Some people might have a fear of quitting a habit, a bad habit. They don't want to feel the anguish or the dread. They might feel like they're suffering if they quit smoking, stop drinking, stop using drugs. There's actual fear in that. So it's how am I going to live without it kind of a fear. Well, there's a lot of people that do. So if it was some magical cure, everybody would be doing it already. And you're the only one that is, so in your world. So I can do remote sessions, as I said before, on Zoom, in person, and occasionally I make house calls, but that's on a case-by-case basis. You can receive a recording of the actual hypnotics after we had our session. And then you can just listen to that every day for daily reinforcement. Also just make, recording. I can just talk to you for 15 minutes and just make you a recording right on based on that phone call, customized to you. Of course, yeah, there's always fees for everything, but I try to keep everything as reasonable as possible. There are different techniques that I can use to help with that ferophobia. Some of them are in person, some of them can be remote or both. It just depends on what it is that we're working on. And where the experiences you had. But we are going to go back in time cognitively to discuss where the phobia or fear started. And then all my life, well, we're going to pinpoint all my life what that actually means. All my life. Get a timeline going and see where that is and how you see your timeline. And just kind of rise above it and see where it's at. Anyway, that's fears and phobias in a nutshell. It's a much more deeper discussion, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. Again, my name is Isla Brock. I am a certified hypnotherapist. I am at Central Valley Hypnotherapy. That's the name of my company. You can find me online at centralvalleyhypnotherapy.com, and you can contact me that way or by the phone number. You can send a voicemail, a text. Carrier pigeon works too. I'm in Visalia, California. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining me today. Again, just give me a call if you are at all interested in how to help you with the fear and phobia. Take care, and I look forward to next time.